Hi folks, and welcome back to Quarantine According to Eddie, and today is kind of a special edition of the Motorcycle Enquiries. We're down in the hatch, it's a warm day, so I'm beating the heat down here. It's, 20 past 2 on the 11th of April, and some people have been emailing in, particularly about the Motorcycle Enquiries, and saying, yeah, I love the motorcycle videos, I want to get into motorcycling myself, but it's kind of intimidating, I don't know anything about it, could you make a video about it? So yeah, of course. I mean, I love the idea of more people getting into motorcycling. I mean, yeah, it's got its risks, we all know that, but it's got its rewards as well. I mean, there's the beautiful machines, for some people there's the social camaraderie of it, there's a lot to be gained from it. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the machines, about what you need to know about them, what you need to know about the people as well that you might be coming across, and also share some of my experiences about how I got into motorcycling and what it all means to me. So how did I get into motorcycling? Well, I mean, from the year nothing I was into machines. I loved cars, and the first experiences I had were working on my dad's car with him. It got to the stage where basically I was looking after the mechanical side of it, and I really loved that. But as an early teenager, then sort of dawned on me, hang on, there's two-wheeled machines out there as well. And I just really fell in love with the idea. And my first motorbike was, it was a rally mountain bike with a lawnmower engine stuck in it. It was completely unmanageable. But I got what was essentially a chainsaw engine and put that in, and it worked and it ran, and suddenly it really kindled this kind of love of working on the machine, fixing it up, and then getting out there and the thrill of being out there in the open. And that's what motorcycling means to me, and that's sort of where it all grew from. You know, I love being in the garage, turning spanners. I mean, all of the motorcycles that I've got are old, and they've got a little bit of character. Read, they need a lot of work. If you don't like getting oily hands, these are not the machines for you. But I love that. But also it's that freedom out on the road as well. There's no feeling quite like it. You can't describe it. Of being out in the air, in the elements, in control of this machine. It's like the difference between driving and riding is like watching something on TV and seeing it in real life. It's that kind of feeling of reality. It's an unmistakable, unforgettable experience. But it's quite alien to a lot of people, and unless you know someone who's got a motorcycle, you're unlikely to get the chance to get out on one. So, you know, perhaps we need to think about a little bit about the machines and what they're like, so that you can potentially, you know, get a feel for what this is all about. So there's a whole myriad of different machines out there. You've got all kinds of different motorcycles of all kinds of ages. But they all share some similar things. I mean, beyond the fact they've got two wheels and handlebars. They generally operate in the same way. You've got a throttle up here on your right hand, front brake up here, and then you've got a back brake operated by your foot, so you're actually controlling both brakes independently. You've got clutch on your hand. Now if you're driving a car, that will be your left foot. So your left foot becomes your left hand, your right foot becomes your right hand. You change gear with your foot as well. But actually, you know, it kind of works. Because if you think about it, your feet are kind of, they're not very delicate, are they? Really, your hands are much more delicate. So changing gear, just simple motion, kind of makes sense to do that with your foot. And to control the throttle and clutch and brake, which require a lot more care and attention, to do that with your hands. Or at least, that's how I always thought about it. So those are similar. Generally, motorcycles will have one or two seats. So for example, this one, the good old Royal Enfield, has only got one seat on, but this one has got two. Now you can't take a passenger unless you pass your test, and there's good reason for that. It really affects your balance, and balance is really important. But don't get me wrong, if you're a bit unbalanced on your feet, that doesn't mean you can't ride a motorcycle. I mean, hey, I am the clumsiest person in the world, and yet, you know, I can handle my bikes. Because, if nothing else, the big engine, the big tyres, provide a gyroscopic force. So once the motorcycle is moving, it actually keeps you very much upright. So something that's not to be scared of, really, when you're moving anyway, is balance. These beautiful machines will balance themselves. So actually, as long as you can hold it upright and you can control it at slow speeds, once you get over about walking pace, they'll keep balance to themselves. And that goes for any size of motorcycle. The only other thing that is perhaps a little bit different between motorcycles is that these, which are old British bikes, have got a right-hand side gear shift and a left-hand side foot brake, whereas normally it's the other way around. Like any American, Japanese, any other bikes, any other motorcycles will be the other way around. It's just British ones. And why is that? Mechanically simple when they were being built, and the tradition stuck. But apart from that, they're pretty much the same. So, in terms of your positions and how you'd be riding on various different motorcycles, we'll start with the classic style. You know, your everyday kind of commoner garden motorcycle, the ones that you'll see buzzing around. And you often sat there with your feet kind of in the middle, hands just a little bit further out in front, back relatively straight. It's a nice comfortable riding position for commuting and that kind of thing. It's what my dad would call a sit up and beg kind of bike. Now, if you were on a sports bike, I'm going to try and demonstrate this with the passenger pegs. There we go. You'd have your feet further back, hands probably a little bit further forward, and you're lying down over the tank. Not very comfortable for long distances, but it gives you more control over the machine because you're right lying into it, and when you're getting your knee down in the corners, makes you aerodynamic when you're out on the straights, helps you go faster, and that's what sports bikes are all about. They're all about speed, and their engines and setup are designed that way as well, which we'll talk about a little later. The other end of the spectrum to sports bikes are cruisers, and they're the ones where you've got handlebars further up and back and your feet further forward. You're essentially lying back into the motorcycle. They're designed for cruising. It doesn't matter if you're not going fast. That's not what they're designed for. So you're not particularly aerodynamic, but it is a comfortable position. It's just that laid back, easygoing kind of thing. Within that kind of spectrum, you've got the sort of the classic and commuter in the middle. You've also got dirt bikes, which have mid controls and sort of middle handlebars, but maybe a little bit higher up, because you want to be able to stand up and move the bike around. They're often quite light, dirt bikes. I'll talk about why later. And so you control them on the dirt and on the gravel by standing up and moving your weight around like that. Moving to the other side, sort of, you've got cruisers, but you've also got the big touring bikes. You know, you sort of see them around these, the ones with bags and boxes on, big windscreens, that kind of thing. You tend to have your feet a little further forward and handlebars just a little further back. So again, it's almost like you're sitting in a lounge chair because you're going to be doing thousands of miles potentially. Now they're big heavy machines. Those and cruisers are the big heavy ones. A lot of cruisers you'll be looking at 1/4 of a ton, and tourers you can be looking at heavier than that. But the way that the weight's all laid out, you can manage them. The other type that's in there, well, another common type, I mean there are loads of different subtypes, but another common type is the dual sport. So that's something that can go off-road and on the road. They tend to be quite a classic kind of position as well. Sort of a bit classic-y, bit dirt bikey. And then you might have something that's sort of, you know, feet a little bit further back and you're a little bit more crunched forward when you get into sort of Sportster or Street Fighter type bikes, which are, you know, the sort of the sportier, so not quite a full-on sports bike, but sportier. So really, what it comes down to is a spectrum between that and that, depending on what you're trying to do. And it's at this point I feel I ought to get onto the icon, the real star of the Motorcycle Enquiries, my Royal Enfield. Now, this is a real classic, and classics are sort of, you know, they cross over all of the different different boundaries, because you get classic cruisers, you get classic tourers, but believe it or not, in a sense, this is actually more like a dual sport, so more like a sort of semi-dirt and road bike at the same time. And it may seem strange to think of seeing a classic like this, but back in the 30s and 40s when these were being made, well, although they've, you know, they have been made since, but when they were being designed, I should say, a lot of roads weren't paved. And so you had to be able to drive over unpaved roads, maybe even over fields as well. And that's why it's got actually quite a high ground clearance. So big, thick tyres, easy to reach components as well, easy to work on in terms of the maintenance, because you'd be maintaining it yourself, might have to do running repairs on the side. Big headlights to give you the best view possible in bad conditions. Look at the size of those wheels as well. I mean, they are big wheels to get you over potholes and such. So actually, it's sort of, although it's a classic and certainly best suited to the road, it is kind of dual sporty, and I've certainly ridden it off-road, and it's surprisingly well-mannered. So, who are you going to meet while you're out on two wheels? Well, I'm speaking from a British context, because every country has its different cultural contexts, which I may well talk about in another video. But the answer is really anyone. Anyone of any background, of any minority, male, female, neither. They're all out there on two wheels. Yeah, sure, motorcycling in the UK is still primarily made up of the pale male and stale. You know, old white men do make up the largest number, but you will meet anyone out there, because they're united not really by any kind of social demographics or background or anything like that. They're united by these machines and the love of the machines. If you're there and if you love your machine, if you love motorcycling, whether it is as a group or whether it's on your own, whichever type of machine that you ride, on the track, on the dirt, on the road, point is, you're one of the clan. You're one of the riders. You often see bikers kind of nodding to each other or saluting, or, you know, a little wave of the fingers. It's because they recognise that if you're out there on two wheels, then, you know, you're one of us. And it doesn't matter if you're on your little 125 with L plates on, or even on a moped, it doesn't matter. You're one of us. So, as intimidating as it might be, and you know, to start with, sort of thinking, you know, this is going to be kind of a real clique to get into, actually, it's not so. You will be welcomed, no matter who you are, as long as you're doing it for the right reasons, you care about your machine, you're not there just to pose, and it always helps if you've got, you know, a little bit of knowledge as to how to actually maintain and run these machines. And again, I'll make another video about the mechanical side of it. Incidentally, if you ever do need any help looking after these kind of machines, look for either a dirt rider or a classic rider. If they own a dirt bike or something that's old, they'll know how to turn spanners, and they'll be more than willing to help you out. So I want to get you back out there on the road. So I hope you've enjoyed this kind of little rundown of the basics of motorcycles, and kind of what you'd be getting into, and you know, if you've enjoyed this, then you know, maybe I'll make some more videos on sort of more of the mechanical side of it, more of the cultural side of it as well. But anyway, in the meantime, if you've got any questions or comments as usual, then feel free to get in touch. Otherwise, thanks for watching and see you next time.